What's up, rockers? Welcome to another episode of the Talk Louder podcast, where we geek out on all things rock and roll. Hit that subscribe button on our YouTube channel. Leave us your likes and comments. You can also leave likes and comments on our Facebook page. Follow us on iTunes, Spotify, and Instagram at talklouder_podcast. And of course, our website, talklouderpodcast.com. I'm Metal Dave, along with my co-host, Jason McMaster. And today's guest is Mr. Chris Gates. We're so happy to have him. He's been around the Austin music scene forever. He's been around the international music scene. You guys know him probably best as the founding member and guitarist, one of the founding members and guitarist of Junkyard. He also has a history before that with a band called the Big Boys that was highly influential in the punk rock scene. And his story is just amazing, fantastic.
Chris is the reason Austin used to be cool.
Yeah. And thankfully he's still here, so he's kind of
Austin's still cool because of Chris Gates.
He's still upping our cool cred,
yeah. The cool cred that people. Oh, I went to Austin. It's cool. They're going to mention nothing that's related to Chris Gates. So obviously the things that they think are cool are like post cool Austin. So yeah, it's true. If I may, I want to throw this in here. It was a good setup you did, Dave. How are you, by the way?
I'm fantastic, man.
Excellent. Yeah, we get to hang out with Chris Gates. So here's the deal. I wanna just vomit on you guys for a second here at Talk Louder. Chris Gates is the reason. Chris Gates is how the metal guys in the early Austin scene learned how to make a poster, to print your own T-shirts. The DIY thing was started by the punk rockers. I've mentioned it 100 times on this show. Chris Gates is the reason. I tell the story, and I'll tell it again, about how I run into Chris Gates on, downtown Austin, hanging up posters for his show. He's not even on the bill. It's my show. Shouldn't I be the one putting up the posters on telephone poles in 1983?
Yes.
It's Chris. I should be. Well, the thing is we were, and I was driving all over town and hitting these areas, and here I see a guy who's not even on his band's not even on the show, hanging up posters. You know what? You don't see that anymore.
Yeah. Very passionate dude in everything he does. And dating all the way back, like you said, a lot of people know him as the musician on stage, but before any of that, he was, as you said, helping Watchtower. And he brought Slayer to Austin for the first time as a concert promoter and I don't know if he booked gigs or just promoted them or whatever, but he had a hand in making things happen. And by making things happen, I'm talking about bringing bands like Slayer, Watchtower, Trouble. I think he said
there's a ton of bands. I do think that he was involved. He mentioned Exciter, but he said Exciter from Florida earlier when we were talking to him, and he meant Nasty Savage. So that opens up a whole other can of worms. He was bringing bands from it was coastal. He was bringing bands from all over the place to Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Florida. And it was all because his phone number was the only phone number that anyone had in Austin if someone needed a fucking gig.
Yeah, it was like, for a good rock show, call Chris Gates.
Yeah, it was on a bathroom wall.
Yeah, it's on a bathroom wall. So.
Which is perfect, which is just fantastic. And I personally love the guy so much because he's, what's the word that it's like he's guileless. You know what I mean? He's
genuine too.
Yeah, there's no weirdness, and if there ever was, it's gone now because of the changes that the improvements he's made upon his life, and he'll tell you all about them.
At what point did your fandom of rock music, you're collecting 45s, you're going to concerts, you're meeting the Ramones, thanks to a coworker. At what point do you buy your first guitar and start learning how to play?
I was about 13, and I got a 1961 Fender Mustang and this little solid state Univox amp that no matter how loud you turned it up, it wouldn't distort. And there was, people don't know what it was like back then, but like there were 2,500 people in my high school, and there was one other person who played guitar.
That's a lot of folks when not enough guitar players.
You know, it's like back then, I mean, you remember, Jason, it was like, you can't be an artist or a musician, or they're from New York or London. They're not you in Texas for sure. It was like Journey at the Normo Dome and me in my room with a guitar and nothing in between.
Right.
Yeah. You know, and I mean, you know, and I would find guys to play with here and there. The first band I ever played with was with a talent show with a bunch of black guys from the football team doing a Kool and the Gang cover. And, you know, and then it was like
awesome.
I went to a church youth group overnight lock-in thing.
I'm sorry, was that at McCallum?
Yeah, I was still at Lamar Junior High.
Lamar Junior. Oh, that's in junior high. Whoa,
and I went to this lock-in thing, and this older kid was there, and he brought a copy of Big Bamboo by Cheech and Chong, Machine Head, and Paranoid. And so I heard those three records at the same time, and like my life was never the same.
Oh my God.
You know,
that's so
like
heavy metal heavy metal parking lot, dude.
Yeah. Machine Head is still one of my all-time favorite records. Wow. And, you know, so, you know, and I'm still going to garage sales, and I'd run across a copy of Raw Power when I was in 7th grade and Funhouse. And like, I love those. And I was, you know, my parents were fairly sure I was gay in middle school because I was growing my hair out. I wasn't talking to anybody, especially girls. And I was carrying around Bowie and Stooges records all the time. But, you know,
it's not really their fault that they thought that.
What's there to worry about? No, you know, not at all. I mean, there's not like they would have cared, but it was just like, what's going on with Chris, you know?
Yeah.
But what's there to worry about?
Your brothers knew, though. Your brothers knew what's up.
Yeah. Well, I'm the oldest, so they were kind of following up behind me.
Oh, right. Okay. That's right.
And, you know, and I about 9 or 10 months after hearing Machine Head and Paranoid at a garage sale, I ran across Get Your Wings and the first Aerosmith record. And I hadn't heard anything by Aerosmith at that point because no radio station in Austin played anything like Aerosmith or rock and roll at all.
Not
but
yet.
I had read their name in one Hit Parade or something. So I bought both of them for like 50 cents a piece and brought them home, and like Get Your Wings became my new favorite record. And
well, what year is this? If those records are in a garage sale,
it was early, 74 maybe.
Yeah. Then why are those fairly new releases? Someone just selling their
college students.
Yeah. College. Oh, right.
You know,
college students getting rid of shit. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Somebody's broke.
Yeah. It's all college
you're
students.
Lucky. Yeah. They're broke and you're lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sweet.
So that's I'm a huge Aerosmith fan, and Get Your Wings is just a masterpiece.
Like I learned to play guitar listening to Get Your Wings and the first Ted Nugent solo record and the first Bad Company record and the first couple of ZZ Top records. You know, it's like, because there were things on there that were approachable, that were you could almost figure them out by listening to the record, you know. And it's, you know, I remember figuring out Same Old Song and Dance and just the riff on Same Old Song and Dance. And I just probably played that for like a month.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's a great riff.
If you could, once you figure out how to tune it, you know.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Dave.
Knowing you as long as I have, and knowing your musical background, I've never really pegged you as a metal dude. So in your younger years, were you ever, I mean, you mentioned Aerosmith, Black Sabbath, Deep Purple, and, you know, you could classify those as metal bands, but
I would never call them metal.
No.
Okay.
Neither.
So
they're hard rock bands. I'm a hard rock guy.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Like,
so I guess that's my question. I never
Purple, not Black Sabbath. I like Black Sabbath. I like Deep Purple better.
Okay.
You know, for me, I guess the difference in metal and hard rock is still sort of blues based and metal kind of isn't.
Gotcha.
You know, metal doesn't swing much and hard rock does. You know, you can still hear the blues in Deep Purple and in Aerosmith, but there's not a lot of blues real obviously in, you know, Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath or Iron Maiden or Judas Priest, which I loved them too.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I loved everything in high school. Like I told you about the lock-in and Deep Purple and Black Sabbath, but like less than a year later, I went over to this kid's house who lived in my neighborhood, and he wasn't home, but his mom was there. So I was ended up waiting for about an hour for him to show up. And she played me the first John Prine record and Small Change by Tom Waits, one side of each record. And like, once again, my life was never the same. And those are two of my all-time favorite records.
Wow.
You know,
very diverse.
it's like, oh my God,
background.
I don't know what this stuff is, but I got to go hear more. So
Yeah.
Let's fast forward to your days in the Big Boys.
How long after it was you were hearing those records and then forming, what was the first band before, what turned into Big Boys? I'm sorry, Dave, to take over your question, but that's kind of where I was going a few minutes ago. It's like, what sort of snowballed into the Big Boys? If there was something else right before it, and I'm as far as like me and Dave know your history or feel like we do, feel like if there was anything right before the Big Boys, I don't know what it is. School me, please.
there wasn't. It was cover bands in high school and, just sort of banging around. And like, honestly, the way it all happened was like, I was a huge rock guy. I love, singer-songwriters. But for me, by about 1977, like the last records I bought, hard rock records I bought were Toys in the Attic and the first Van Halen record. And after that, it all started feeling real overblown. And, Steve Perry joins Journey and Michael McDonald joins the Doobie Brothers. And it's all this lame. It just feels lame to me. And right around the same time, I see the Ramones. And then I hear Elvis Costello, and I see Devo on Saturday Night Live. And this feels fresh. This reminds me of that bubblegum rock and some of the glam stuff that I liked in middle school. And it's stripped down, and it doesn't have all that pomp and circumstance and late 70s rock star nonsense with it. And the cover band I was in rehearsed in the basement of this church off of 22nd and Guadalupe down by the campus. And one Friday night after we had been jamming, I was riding my bike home and I rode right past Raoul's. And there were all these people hanging around outside, and they looked like the people that had been at the Ramones concert. So I locked my bike up and I went in. And I saw two songs by this band called The Mistakes. And then I saw a band called The Next, and was like, I'm a senior in high school. And I go, I don't know what this place is, but this is going to be my new home. Like, I want to know who these people are.
Right.
And because that music scene was approachable, it was doable. Like, I didn't know how I got from my bedroom to the Irwin Center, but I could see how I could get into Raoul's.
Sure.
Yeah. For those who are listening that don't know, Raoul's was, sort of it was almost Austin's version of CBGB's, just to put it bluntly.
And kind of at the same time.
Everyone played there, like a legendary punk band.
Punk rock, hole in the wall, dive.
Exactly.
Kind of.
Yeah, it's where it started in Austin. And like, I had started skateboarding in 75, 76. I met Biscuit, who lived next door to this kid I knew. And he came back from California with a urethane wheel skateboard in about 1974 or 75. And we went, oh, that's badass. So we all started skateboarding. And then along the way, I met Tim Kerr, the guitar player from the Big Boys. And like, Tim and his wife and I went and saw a band play at Raoul's just after I graduated high school. And the Hispanic guys that ran the place, one of them was the dad of this kid who played football with my little brother at McCallum. So like, I recognized him from the games. And so Tim said, I wonder what it takes to play here. So I got up and went back and talked to this guy, Bobby Morales, and said, Bobby, what does it take to play here? And he said, well, when do you want to play? And so I went running back to Tim and said, dude, he said, when do you want to play? And so we started a band. I mean, literally, that's what it was. He said, when do you want to play? So we started a band.
Oh, that's perfect.
So
I want to pause
of the Big Boys.
Yeah. I want to pause. The Mistakes and The Next, those were local bands, correct?
Yeah.
And The Next, I believe someone in The Next was employed at the infamous now Another Raw Deal restaurant, if not the Raw Deal, here in Austin, Texas, who probably employed half of the musicians in town at some point, including myself and David Roach.
Yeah.
But I think the bass player, where I worked with the bass player for The Next, I think, down there at Another Raw Deal.
Yeah, probably.
Anyway, I wanted to just kind of throw that in there so the people who are local around here, who are people of a certain age might recall these names and these bands and these flyers and Raul's and I love the story about you running back to Mr. Morales and saying and just getting a gig on the fly like that.
Yeah, I mean, like we went back and Biscuit had always been singing. He had a great voice, so we asked him to be the singer. He almost didn't do it because somebody else had asked him before us, but that fell apart. And we were trying to find a drummer, and I ran into this guy, Steve Collier, my first day at UT, and like we used to skateboard together, and he was a drummer. So he became the drummer, and we started playing shortly thereafter, and one thing led to another.
And you guys kind of became the kings of the whole Raul's Austin punk rock scene shortly thereafter. I mean, you start
Over time,
off you start off as a fan just trying to get into Raul's and checking out bands, and then you start the Big Boys. And the Big Boys, by anyone that, as far as anyone that ever paid attention to Austin music history, you're sort of inextricably linked to Raul's. And in fact, your first album is called Live at Raul's with the split with the Dicks. So tell us about that scene and you guys sort of rising to the top of the ranks, and just give us a snapshot of what the Austin punk rock scene looked like at that time.
One of the coolest thing about the scene here is that, like, in a lot of places, all the bands sound like variations on a theme. Like all the bands are hardcore bands or something like that. But Austin was really, because the punk scene was coming up out of the film school and the drama school and the architecture school at UT. And a lot of the people who started the punk scene were 4 or 5 years older than me, and they were very much focused on New York, on television and the Dolls and all the stuff happening at CB's early on. And so there was this insane diversity of music here. And it was, everybody supported it, especially in the early days, where, the band, nobody sounded like anybody else. Everybody was really good at what they did, really creative. And just the music was all over the map. And we were too. And, they just told us, just do whatever you want, which was great. We were terrible for the first 6 months, but we figured it out. And Biscuit was always entertaining, and that kept getting us gigs in the start.
What year was this sort of like, cocoon butterfly kind of time?
Really what happened was we had been playing around for about a year. We decided if we were a band for 6 months, we wanted to make a single. So we did. And most of the bands, local bands, hadn't done that. Like only really one band had put out a single at that point. And all the bands that had been around longer than us hadn't done it yet, but we went, screw it, and we did it. And then the next summer we decided to go on tour. We had met Black Flag. We had played with them in Austin.
What year is this?
This is 1981.
Okay.
And we had been playing to the same 40 or 50 people for a year. And then we left and we went to California on tour, and we did about 8 or 9 shows in a 2-week trip. Almost nobody saw us. Nobody knew who we were. Our record wasn't available outside of Austin. But when we came back, there were like 150 people at our first show. It's like suddenly people started taking us seriously because we went on tour. And because of the guys that were in the band, we were very much into this DIY thing. And we were all really good at different things. And, at art and making posters and putting out flyers, and we would book shows. And even when Raul's and the other clubs closed, we had learned from Black Flag about renting halls. So we started renting halls and putting on our own shows. And it just kept getting bigger and bigger. And then, when we put the Fun EP out on, and it had Hollywood Swinging on it, that started getting a lot of play in like new wave dance clubs and stuff. So suddenly our audience was much larger than just the punk scene. We were playing to 500, 600, 700, 800 people when most of the shows were a couple of hundred. And, it just got bigger and bigger and bigger, until we finally imploded. But, it was awesome.
You guys are sort of credited with introducing sort of a little bit of a funk element into the punk / hardcore hybrid, whatever you want to call it. And bands like, Red Hot Chili Peppers and I guess like Fishbone, these guys went on to sort of, they kind of ended up defining the genre, but you were sort of there first, and those bands I think would even cite you as an influence. So what kind of brought that funk element into the mix?
We had this mindset in the band of we can do anything we want as a band, like anything. If something interests us, let's try it. And Biscuit was really his favorite music was old soul and R&B, and he had a phenomenal voice. And I had played, like, I was a big fan of Kool and the Gang and the Ohio Players and all that stuff, the funk from the early 70s, because I had been introduced to it by these guys in middle school. They all, you know, I could barely play the guitar, but they showed me what to play and they were great on their instruments. And we, you know, they took me to see Ohio Players and Cameo and Earth, Wind and Fire, or Kool and the Gang at Palmer Auditorium, like, you know, in 1974 or something. And so I had that in my background, and Tim liked funk too. And so we started fooling around with the ideas. And then, you know, it occurred to me, like, I got a brother who plays trombone who's still in the high school band. I bet I could get him and some of his friends to come be a horn section. And one thing led to another,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, I think it's great that, you know, like, especially the Chili Peppers went on to sort of, you know, this international acclaim, and they cite you as an influence, and a whole genre sort of popped up based on that sound. You know, I mentioned the Chili Peppers and Fishbone, but you could throw in Faith No More, and you know, just any band that added sort of a funk element to what was at the time considered, you know, you got your chocolate in my peanut butter kind of thing, you know?
Right. Well, and, you know, and once again, we had very broad tastes, and it wasn't just we like the Sex Pistols or we like the Ramones. We did, but we also were really big fans of Gang of Four and Joy Division and Public Image and like all the weird stuff that was coming out too. And a lot of that stuff had a sort of a funk element to it. And we just took it one step further and said, what would happen if we played actual funk? Like, you know, our version.
Yeah.
You know, but the difference in us and a band like the Chili Peppers or Fishbone is that they made that their thing. And that was just maybe one of 5 different things that we did over the course of a set.
Right.
You know, it wasn't ever, there were only ever 3 or 4 funk songs in the set ever. And we played 25 songs every time we played. So it was still only an hour.
You mentioned the Fun EP, and anyone who lives in Austin has heard of the Fun Festival. It's a music festival for anyone listening that's not familiar. It's a music festival that started here in Austin, and it became huge. It had a good run for a number of years. You know, in a town that's got multiple music festivals on the calendar each year, Fun became one of the biggest. You could compare it, you know, you could say it in the same breath as, you know, Austin City Limits or South by Southwest or one of those. So my question to you is, I've always wanted to know this. Did you guys get any sort of compensation for them taking the name of your song and turning it into the name of the festival?
Doesn't work like that.
No. But, you know, I mean, otherwise we would have had to pay the Beach Boys because they got there first. But the festival, it not only took the name, right? But later, as I got to know Grant, the guy who started it, it took the mentality of the song. Because in the second verse of the song, like at the time I wrote the song, the punk scene was becoming fragmented. And like hardcore people didn't like people doing what they called new wave, but was really post-punk or anything weird. They just liked hardcore. And you weren't, you know, you had to be, you're for us or you're against us. And I didn't have the patience for that nonsense. So it was about, you know, the second verse of the song is about liking all of these bands, like all of them. And I refuse to choose. You can't make me. It's, you know, and he took that mindset. And so like, if you look at the bills that they would put together, it would be very diverse.
Yeah.
Because that was the mindset, is like, why can't we do a festival where Quicksand and Grandmaster Flash and Ministry are all playing on the same day?
Yeah. Having many flavors is the idea.
Yeah.
And why are you going to just look at black and white when you can have color?
And ultimately, it was very flattering and humbling for him to have taken that song 20 years after it came out and turned it into something really cool. Because that was the whole mindset of the big boys, is like, it's great that you love us. What are you doing? What are we going to do on our day off? We need to come see you. Go start a band or a festival.
What do you think if I say something like, aren't the big boys famous by, you know, hey, go, what is it? Shut up, go form your own band or something like that.
Yeah, all of our records said, go start your own. Now go start your own band on it.
Now go start your own band. You can't be in this one, start your own, right?
And one of the things that we would do all the time is because people put us on shows when we were brand new and could barely play. And so we were always encouraging people, if you start a band, we'll put you on our show. And we had all these, I saw a picture of this band called The Infected. The average age in the band was 15, but it was Adam Grossman from Screw and Felix from DRI and a guy named Chico and a guy named Richard Mather, who played in a bunch of other bands, Rockbusters and stuff around Austin. But they were all barely in high school. But we told them, yeah, you got a band, you can play with us. And they played with us at the Ritz.
Around here, those are like household names.
Yeah.
Around here. And
all great guys.
Yeah.
So we were really big on being inclusive and, get up here. Even if it's awful, at least you did it,
Right.
So you guys ended up, because of the diversity in your music, you were on a bunch of, very unusual bills, I guess you could say. Like you had the Chili Peppers actually open for you, if I'm not mistaken, at some point.
Yeah, one of their earliest gigs out in LA was opening for us one time when we were out there.
That's crazy. And then I saw somewhere that that you played a gig with Sam Hain. Is that right?
Oh yeah, we played a bunch of gigs with Sam Hain, and we all the hardcore bands, but we also played 5 dates with the Go-Go's, and we opened for Grace Jones.
Oh wow.
Rad.
That was a weird one. I don't know that anybody else could have pulled that off because she sang to pre-recorded background music. So her contract said the opening act can't be a live band because even if they're bad, they'll be more exciting than pre-recorded background music. So the club that booked the show gave us money, and we went in the studio and recorded backing tracks for 10 songs and then just played them through the PA and went up and sang. We didn't
I don't believe you.
We didn't
really,
lip sync.
I didn't. Chris,
we didn't pretend to play. We put on a skit for each of the 10 songs, and whoever was up there singing was up there singing.
You're crazy. You did not do that.
Yeah, it was, because for us, it was like, well, this is weird. Let's do it. Like everybody else would have went, screw that. But like, that's the kind of thing we were up for.
Tell me about the Go-Go's shows, because the Go-Go's have a core based here out of Austin. You guys are from Austin. So is there, any kinship on that? You guys are in this together, going out to conquer the world in the name of Austin.
They were on the tour for their very first record, and they were playing medium-sized clubs. The record had just come out; it hadn't really exploded yet by any stretch, and because of the crossover thing, like a lot of the new wave clubs where they were playing had been playing Hollywood Swinging, and they knew that we drew people in. So, we played with them in Houston and I think San Antonio and Dallas, and then Austin was the last date.
I'm interested in the year that was.
I used to drink. I don't know. Whatever year that record came out, probably 83.
Okay.
Wow. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, the record had literally just come out.
So before we get away from the big boys touring, tell me a little bit about the Sam Hain shows or show. Was it plural? I want to know about that.
And I can't remember, honestly, because it all kind of blurs together. We did apparently 3 different shows with the Misfits. And I know Poison 13 did a whole bunch of shows with Sam Hain. But I can't remember if the big boys played with Sam Hain or not. I honestly can't remember, because that was right in the transition time between those two bands. And like there was a minute where I was in Sam Hain.
Oh, really?
Where when the Misfits broke up, Minor Threat had broken up, and Lyle and Brian Baker from Minor Threat and Glenn were trying to put a band together, and they contacted me to see if I wanted to play bass. And I said, okay, maybe. And so we were sending cassettes back and forth to each other. But like at that point, if my memory serves, Brian and Lyle had gone really hardcore into The Alarm. They were super into The Alarm. And Glenn hadn't quite figured out what he wanted to do yet. And they were writing all this music that sounded like The Alarm. And it was a little more jangly than what they had done in the past.
Yeah.
But I'm in Texas and they're in DC and he's in New York, and it's long distance and it peters out. And then 6 months later, he's got an actual band together.
Yeah. So let's wrap up the big boys. Tell us what eventually led to the demise of the big boys.
Well, there are a lot of varying opinions on this, but ultimately, Tim Kerr always gets mad at me when I say this, but ultimately it's money, and not we weren't fighting over money. We didn't have any. and we started doing longer tours. Like when you're broke and you're sleeping on people's floors, going out for 2 weeks is one thing, but going out for 3 months is a whole different thing. And you also have to remember that I was 18 to 23 in the big boys, but Tim is 6 years older than me and Biscuit was 13 years older than me. So Biscuit's sleeping on floors and living on $5 a day at 33 years old.
Yeah.
35 years old. And that's freaking hard. Like, I didn't know how much different it was being 35 than being 22, but it's not the same. And it was really hard on him, and he didn't manage it well. And I wasn't understanding and just being, because he made no money doing it.
That's hard.
If we would have been able to have hotel rooms and a nice van, we might have made it through that. But the longer tours and the really going in deep and just being completely broke and having no cushion, Biscuit had no cushion, I had no cushion. It just brought out the conflict in the personalities. Ultimately, that's what it was.
Sure.
I remember.
I would do that.
I remember. I recall age. I was just going to make a funny. I recall like age. Barely recall age like 35 plus. Like, you know, staking claim in the fact that I can't sleep in cat piss anymore. You know, you sleep over at someone's house. Oh, y'all can crash at my place, and there's just the floors, a couple of pillows, and it's like might as well sleep on the dirt in the back in the alley behind the club.
It's all exciting in your 20s, and it's hard in your 30s, and it's brutal in your 40s, even if you're in a hotel.
Yeah.
You know, it just is. So
you draw the line at some. No one can blame you guys for any.
No, I mean, there are specific arguments and things that happened that caused the demise of the band, but underneath it, and a lot of bands broke up right around the same time that started around the same time as us. And a lot of it has to do with the same stuff. Like Husker Du lasted 3 extra years, but they got some money coming in from the major label deal.
Yeah.
You know, but a lot of the other hardcore bands fell apart because they were doing longer tours just like us, and they were all broke just like us. And it was just hard.
Yeah.
So we're about to switch gears. I want to talk about Poison 13 for a minute. They may have been short-lived, even shorter lived than the Big Boys, correct?
Yeah, well, the band itself lasted almost the same amount of time. My involvement was only the first couple of years.
Oh, okay.
And then I moved to LA to do Junkyard, and they did it for another year or so after I was gone.
And we're going to get to that. Let's back up to about 1983. Yeah, 1983 or ish. Yeah. Late 83, let's say, because there's a story I want to tell. I've actually told it before here on the podcast, but now that we have the man in the room, I want to talk about this. So this is where I've been lately making a joke in our episode tapings where, not to make it be about me, but, here it is again. I was in a band called Watchtower. I remember either you or your brother went to school with Billy White. We were just kids in high school. You were almost done you were graduated maybe?
Yeah. I graduated in 79.
And it might have been, so it was your younger brother going to school with Billy White, and they befriended each other at McCallum High School or something. This would have been, like I said, around 83, maybe even earlier, I don't know. And at some point, I just want the world to hear me say this again. You really were a pivotal in the movement and the growth, especially from absolutely nothing, because I joined Watchtower in May of 1982. I know that you were still doing shows with the Big Boys, and you had started doing Poison 13 close to around the same time, because I would see you guys around all the time, because I had a little band before I was in Watchtower, and I would listen to, my ear was to the ground, because I had just moved here from Corpus Christi like a year earlier. And my brother Randy had met Felix, was hanging out with Ben Burton, and was hanging around with all of the, Rob Buford and EKU and just, all the South Austin Goon Squad was all there skateboarding and whatever havoc they could
taking acid and riding BMX bikes all night long.
whatever it was. Yeah, I was waiting for something like that to top it. So
yeah.
At some point you hear about Watchtower and you start getting us gigs.
But my memory of it was there was a girl who I think her name was Stacy, who lied to the people at Austin High School and said that she was in the Big Boys so that we could play at the school carnival in the fall. When bands from school were playing, and
the spring thing,
right? And the first time I remember meeting you guys, because there was a band called Crucifix from San Francisco that was staying at my house, and they were going to play with us the next night, and we let them get up and play 3 songs, and they had like Liberty spikes and sounded like Discharge. And the next thing I know, there's a bunch of guys standing right at the front of the stage going, "What the hell is that?"
Yeah.
And I walked off, and it was you and some of the other Watchtower guys. And then
it wasn't. Let me correct you a little bit. And it's okay that it's kind of muddled, because that's going to happen for the next 45 minutes. Muddling is going to happen. So I had a band called Fallen Angel. I had not at that point not met Watchtower people.
Right.
It was Fallen Angel. It was me and Mike Solis's little rock band. Mike played drums and I played bass and sang, and it was at the spring thing. And I got pictures to prove it because they're in the yearbook. And David Roach signed my yearbook.
But then I heard about Watchtower not long after that.
Correct. This is correct.
And I swear, and maybe it was from my brother knowing Billy, but I heard about a party where you guys were playing.
Okay.
And I went and I watched the set at the party, and there was a ton of kids at the party. And when you guys finished, a lot of them left, even though there was still beer. And I went like, "Oh, we should do shows at the Ritz. This is awesome." Because I was setting up all the punk shows at the Ritz. And like I said, I always loved hard rock and heavy metal. And I was a huge fan. I helped bring Metallica here the first time, not really helped, but like the promoter called and said, "Do you know anything about this band?" And I had just seen them in San Francisco, in Berkeley, and went like, "Oh my God, you have to bring them." And so I was a fan of the new underground metal.
Yeah.
And so, let's do it.
Let's see. We'll get back to how we met and how we started working together in a second. But a lot of people need to know, the Slayer fans need to know that Slayer's first performance in Austin, Texas, on their very first tour downtown at the Ritz Theater that was an Alamo Drafthouse movie theater for the past a decade or whatever, and is now, I guess, closed down again. Yeah. You brought Slayer to Texas on their first tour in Austin, Texas. You are the
it's your fault.
That's right. You started something here, and
I brought Slayer, I brought Trouble, I brought Exciter from Florida.
Exciter's from Canada.
What was the band from Florida?
Nasty Savage.
That's who I'm thinking of.
I knew who you were talking about.
Like a lot of these bands had the same couple of booking agents that were also handling some of the punk bands. Perfect. And so I was the phone number they had in Austin.
Perfect.
There wasn't a promoter doing that kind of music yet. And so they would call me.
This is where I want to say, Chris, thanks for getting me a bunch of cool gigs with a bunch of my idols and a bunch of bands I was way, way into.
Yeah, well, yeah. And the entire reason for doing it was so that I had a show to go to.
Wow.
Like if I don't do it, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And I want to see Slayer.
Sure.
I had actually seen, we played a show, the Big Boys played a show at Berkeley Square with the Dead Kennedys and Flipper on a Saturday night. And we had the next night off, and I was wearing a homemade Merciful Fate t-shirt. And the guy at the club was wearing the clubs going, "Dude, you know who Merciful Fate is? You should come back tomorrow." And he put me on the guest list, and I came back the next night and I saw Exodus, Slayer, and Metallica.
Oh my God.
At Berkeley Square. Mustaine was still in Metallica.
Yeah.
Real early for all of them. It was one of somebody's first show in the Bay Area. I don't know, but it was like, I just walked away going like, that was badass.
Yes.
That was because, it was like Black Flag meets Early's Priest. It's like the best,
Yeah. A lot of people, I think, when the basically the thrash metal came in as early as I didn't even think that had been a phrase had been coined yet. When you think about 82, 83, and all of a sudden Metallica and Slayer, these new bands have one record out. I think that it makes you realize it makes you get hyped up. I didn't know that they could play guitars and drums like that.
Right.
It made you want to, if you had the first Dokken record, it made you want to throw it away.
Right. And it felt antiquated almost immediately.
Yeah.
And it was like MDC and DRI had records come out, and that got labeled thrash. And then not long, a year or so later, Kill 'Em All and some of those, the speed metal stuff comes out and going, oh, this is like thrash, but metal.
Right.
And it's
hence thrash metal. Thrash
right.
metal.
And that's kind of where it came from, was like those MDC and DRI got called thrash because it was too fast to be hardcore. It had to have its own name. Yeah. And so I think that's probably how that happened. I don't know. I never really thought about it till right this minute.
So a lot of people in Austin know, when you hear the infamous the famous Continental Club, it's world-renowned blues and singer-songwriter, a rock bar, basically. I call it Cadillac Cowboys. You know what I mean? It's a South Congress. It's especially the way it's blown up now. But there was a time when you could buy drugs and get a hooker and get mugged all in an hour on South Congress, standing right in front of the
club.
Standing right in front of the Continental Club.
Yeah,
and you booked. Say what?
Are you speaking from experience?
No. I just knew better when when I was done with whatever business I had down there was none of the aforementioned. I got the hell out of there because I was small and white.
Yeah, it was like when we were doing the Ritz. When we were doing the Ritz in 82 and 83, 6th Street was not a particularly good neighborhood.
No, it wasn't happy down there very much. Well, depends on who you are, I guess. But the Continental Club, you booked a thrash metal show in there.
Yeah. The funny part was
the guy Slayer. It was S.A. Slayer, Watchtower, and Napalm.
Yeah.
Not to be confused with Napalm Death.
This guy named Mark Pratz was booking Liberty Lunch and the Continental Club at the time. And we approached him when the Ritz fell out from under us about doing Liberty Lunch. He didn't know anything about punk rock. And he said, Liberty Lunch, that's a pretty big room. Let's put you in the Continental Club. And he gave us a Thursday night, and we put like 400 people in the Continental Club. And he went, oh, and maybe Liberty Lunch. And he and I began this relationship where anybody coming to town, like, what size is the band? Where can we put them? That's why Trouble played Liberty Lunch. And that's why anything that was coming through during that little period in 83, 84, we were kind of working together. And eventually he just sort of took it over and everybody called him, which was great. But it's like, let's see how many people we can get.
I wanted to bring that up and just talk about it a little bit. And I'll never forget what you did for like metal kids around here, you not being a metal guy yourself. And it really is important that people know that you were kind of like you were championing all of this. I mean, like your lyrics in Fun, Fun, Fun. It's immediate. It's exactly what's happening. And you were championing all of this fun stuff, these kids that were a little bit younger than you, and you saw something in them and you gave them a chance. And those little kids were me and my heavy metal buddies, and you made it happen. I mean, I got to open for legendary bands because of you, and it's appreciated.
I remember you telling me that one time. It's like, do you realize that you brought Slayer here for the first time and you let me open for them when I was 17? And I'm like, no, I forgot.
Well, I don't think I was 17, but the story sounds good that way. Here's one more thing, and then we'll move on because we can be here for hours. I was down on the Drag. The Drag is campus. It's the main strip. It's Guadalupe Street. It's downtown, close to just north of downtown Austin, Texas. It's world famous as well, for many, many reasons. And I think I was coming out of Inner Sanctum or another Record Exchange.
Yeah,
I'm coming out of Record Exchange, and I'm tooling down the street. And it's broad daylight, and I see off in the distance I see this guy on a 10-speed bicycle with a knapsack, pulling out posters and hanging them up on telephone poles. You were using duct tape, or you had, I don't think you had the spray glue. I don't know if you had the spray glue, just duct tape or something.
Yeah, mostly masking tape. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, I wonder what he's hanging up. And I get a little closer The moral of the story, it was you, Chris. And you know whose posters you were hanging up?
Not a clue.
Mine.
Well, but I knew how, and I was still showing everybody. I mean, like, I'm the oldest in my family, and my wife has this thing, like, she says, I have to be careful what I say out loud around you, because once you hear it and it's in your head, you just go do stuff. It doesn't occur to you not to do stuff. And that's sort of the story of my life. Christ, I moved to Los Angeles at a time when all the boys are dressing like girls, planning on starting a rock band looking like me. And, nobody in LA wanted to play with me, but it didn't occur to me that I wasn't going to succeed. And, I did.
Yeah.
That's a perfect segue, because I wanted to get to, we need to talk about Junkyard, and especially me being a big fan. So, and you've told me some of these stories in the past, and Jason's probably aware of a lot of it as well. But for our listeners, tell us how you and David Roach basically were based in Austin, and the two of you just decided to pack up, go to LA, and try to make it. Is that right?
Not really. I went out to LA with Poison 13, and I stayed after the band went back to Texas. I stayed with this girl, and I ended up going to this party in the basement of this place called the Malaga Castle, which is like the Chili Peppers lived there, and a bunch of my punk rock friends lived there. And I saw Todd Muscat and Pat Mazingo had a new band. Their punk band had transformed into a glam band called Shanghai. And I had already discovered the Hanoi Rocks records and was like completely into Hanoi Rocks, 85 probably. And I went and saw them play at this party. And the last band on the show was Guns N' Roses, playing in this basement in front of about 30 people. And I was wanting to play more and more rock and roll with Poison 13. The punk scene had gotten tedious. And suddenly I realized, oh my God, there's a rock scene out here. So I went home and packed my crap up and got organized and went out there by myself and spent about 6 months trying to find people to play with and not having any real success. Nobody wanted to play with the fat guy from Texas. How's that guy ever going to get a record deal? And
their loss.
During Poison 13, David had a band called the Strapados, and they used to open for us a bunch. And I didn't really know David. Like, the girl that Hands Off is written about lived in the same clothing optional apartment complex as my girlfriend for a while. And like, I would come over and see all of his stuff in the yard. And then 2 weeks later, he'd come over and see all my stuff in the yard. And, it was a little chaotic, but
I love it.
We didn't really know each other, but okay. I heard that he was going to come out to LA, and I got it in my head, I have to track this guy down. So I spent about a week calling people and trying to get his phone number. And I called him and said, look, you're coming out here. When you get here, you and I need to try and start a band. And he went, okay. And then, when he came out, he brought Johnny Hell and the guitar player from the Strapados and the guitar player's wife, a guy named Max Gottlieb and his wife. And they all came and they stayed at my loft for a couple of nights, and I got kicked out for letting them stay there. And we moved into town and got Texas West and started putting the band together. But
wow.
It happened because I couldn't find anybody that wanted to play with me. And so I tracked them down and said, when you get here, it's you and me.
So that kind of hurts my brain that you said you didn't really know him. You didn't really know David Roach when you were in Austin?
As casual acquaintances, but we didn't run in the same circles at all.
Oh,
yeah, he wasn't a stranger. Our bands had played together and stuff, but we didn't hang out. We hadn't really hung out much.
Yeah, you guys hadn't been in a band prior. Or
there's a 4 or 5 year age difference.
Yeah.
We were running in different circles.
I don't think I ever knew that. I thought I knew everything about you, Chris.
I totally set up the question all wrong because I didn't know that.
No, that's great. Well, yeah.
And so that's why we're here, Dave.
Exactly. Yeah. For us to learn something and for our listeners to learn something.
That's right. It's educational.
I had spent those 6 months writing most of the songs on the first record.
Wow.
And by myself in my loft. And then they come out and I start writing with David and we start playing around and very quickly started finding traction. Like I was fully planning on having to be a band for a few years while this glam thing ran its course. And, you know, within about 9 months of starting to play, we got a deal.
Yeah. Didn't you guys get a deal before you had enough material for your first record?
Oh yeah. We did. Like we, you know, everybody in the band was nice guys, and we had come up out of punk rock. So our energy level was higher than most of the other bands, you know? And so this woman named Dale Gloria, hi Dale, we love you. Dale and her partner, Michael Stuart, ran this club called The Screen. And Monday nights in Hollywood and Friday and Saturday nights at this giant place downtown. And they wanted to manage us. So we went, okay. And they put us on a bill. The first band on the bill was Green River from Seattle, who broke up on their way home arguing and became eventually Mudhoney and Pearl Jam. Right. And then we were in the middle.
It's all your fault.
And Jane's Addiction was headline. It's actually Jane's Addiction's fault because half the band wanted to be more professional and more rock like Jane's, and the other half wanted to be more punk rock. And so they split up over that and did exactly that.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah, they sure did.
Actual musical differences, you know?
Yeah.
But it was right when every label in town was trying to sign Jane's. And so they saw us and a guy from Elektra came backstage and said, "You guys are phenomenal. I would love to sign you. Can you give me your promo kit?" And we said, "We don't have one. We don't have a demo. We don't have anything." And he said, "Well, soon." And Elektra was one of my top choice labels. And he says, "As soon as you get something, you have to bring it to me." I went, "Oh, yeah, that's awesome." And like 10 minutes later, this woman comes backstage from Geffen and says, "You know, I love you guys. I would love to work with you. Can you give me your press kit? Can you give me your demos?" I mean, we don't have a demo. She said, "Here's my card. Call me Monday. We'll give you $3,000 to make a demo." And so we signed with Geffen.
Because they gave you money right away.
Right. Because they were willing to pay for it. And, you know, I think they gave us $5,000 to do 3 songs, and we spent $3,000 on 6 songs and gave them the rest of the money back, and they signed us right away.
Wow.
Wow.
So before we move on to the debut album, I want to back up just a bit and tell me how did you meet Brian Baker?
I knew Brian from Minor Threat. Like I knew all the guys in the band from their punk bands.
Right.
You know, I knew Pat from Decry coming through Austin. And when the band started, it was Johnny Hell and Max and me and David and a variety of bass players. Tony Alba was our first bass player.
Wow.
And then Tony got busy, you know, resurrecting his company with somebody and he dropped out, and we ended up with Clay. But I knew Brian from having done a bunch of shows with Minor Threat, both in Texas and on the East Coast. And really like Max was a great guy, but not a great guitar player. And I was also not a great guitar player. I was planning on being the rhythm guitar player and having a hotshot lead guitar player. And I was having to do more of the solo work and whatever. And then when we got signed and we did a showcase for Tom Werman, and Werman came up after the showcase and went, "Man, I would love to produce your record. That guy can't play on it." And
wow. Yeah.
And we went, "Oh, fuck." And so, you know, we got together and talked about it and knew that we were going to have to, we couldn't carry him. And so we made the hard call and let Max go. And we were just beginning we had put an ad in whatever the paper was, you know, and we were just beginning to field some phone calls. And I walked from my girlfriend's apartment around the block to the 7-Eleven in my neighborhood. And I walked in the front door, and there's Brian, and he's grown his hair out.
And this is in LA.
In LA.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm going, "Dude, what are you doing here?" He's going, "Oh, I moved out here. You know, I want to put a band together." I was going, "Like, what kind of band?"
Yeah.
Want to be in a rock band?
Yeah.
And he's going, "You started a rock band?" He's going, "What are you doing right now?" And he walked back over to my girlfriend's apartment, and I played him the demos we had done. And he said, "Yeah, I'm in." And that was that.
Wow. There's your lead guitar player.
So how did the name Junkyard come about? Because it's one of the best rock band names in the history of rock band names.
Yeah.
Well, honestly, it was the name of one of my all-time favorite records by the Birthday Party. They have a record called Junkyard. And when I was thinking, well, actually I wanted to name the band Crack, but that was before there was the drug, right? Just because I liked the sound of it.
Yeah,
That whole onomatopoeia thing, it sounds like a great rock band name. But before I could name a band that, crack happened. And so that was no longer a good name.
Yeah. I think David told us the birthday party story about the
and it's like, I have rules about band names. Like, it has to be easy to pronounce when you see it written. It has to be easy to spell when you hear it spoken. And it either needs to tell you everything or nothing. And Junkyard is one of those names that does both.
Yes.
Like, when you see the name, it could be anything, but when you see the name and the logo and the other stuff that we put with it, you go, okay, trashy rock and roll.
Yes.
And, and so it was just, I lifted it from Nick Cave, but it was perfect for what I wanted to do musically. So
absolutely. So you told me a story also. You get signed to Geffen. You're getting ready to put out the first record, and the album cover of your first album is iconic. And you told me that it was basically just a happy accident. You basically pulled something out of a trash can and said, I don't know what you guys are thinking. This is the album cover right here.
Basically, like, we were battling. Every band I was in, especially Big Boys, like, we were all really involved with the artwork. We would trade, like, you do the front cover this time, I'll do the back cover, and he'll do the insert. And next time he'll do the front cover and you'll do the back cover and I'll do the insert. Like, every record we traded who did what. We were all involved in the creation and the brand and all the rest of it. And so, like, turning it over to, I thought, well, these guys are professionals, and surely they'll be better than me. And then they start, sending us to photo shoots in junkyards. I'm going, are you kidding me? I'm not standing in a trash pile. This is stupid. But they sent us to Tijuana to take pictures, which was a terrible idea. But I remember parts of it, and nobody got arrested. So it was a good trip overall.
Success.
Yes.
But like, when the band started, we needed a look, right? Like, and we're not the kind of guys who can put on silly outfits. It's just not who we are. So basically what we did is we looked at, what do we all wear normally anyway? And where is there an overlap? And let's just focus on the area that overlaps so we look like we belong together. And I was working for a t-shirt printing guy, and I designed both the original Junkyard logo in my attempt to recreate the cover of Humble Pie Rockin' the Fillmore. And then I created that Spade logo, which was a riff on this Motorhead poster that a friend of mine had done for a Motorhead show in LA. And I silk screened the Spade logo onto some cloth. And then I went to this store and bought a bunch of jean jackets and sewed it on and gave everybody their jacket. The original jackets had everybody's names on them at the bottom. And suddenly we're running around looking like a biker gang in a town where everybody's looking like girls. And so we're down in Tijuana and we're taking all these pictures and we're having a good time, but all the pictures, like, they've got these soft focusy, like, it's just awful. And all of their ideas are just awful. And we're literally in the art department at Geffen, and I look over in the trash can and there's all these big 11 by 17 sort of grainy color prints. I'm going, what are those? And they're going, oh, nothing. Those are outtakes or whatever. They're not good pictures. And I start pulling through them, and somewhere in the middle of the pile was that front cover photo. And I'm looking at it and it's blurry and it's out of focus and it looks like fucking Altamont. It looks like there's violence behind this somehow. Like, and I went, oh, dude, this is the cover. And like, they went, what are you talking about? I went, no, this is and I had to fight them for it, and we had to fight them for it, but it was the right call.
I'm glad you won that battle, because that album cover, just like your name, I've said it 100 times. Jason's probably sick of me saying it, but you can never undervalue a great band name or a great album cover or a great looking logo, because even if you take it home and decide you don't like it, guess what? You took it home. And you know what I mean? So Junkyard's the perfect name. That album cover, especially that debut album cover, is iconic. And the fact that you pulled it out of a trash can makes it even cooler.
I was going to say that's a happy accident. And if you want to find your album cover art, don't take yourself so fucking serious. Just look in the trash can.
you know, it helps to have a good eye. You know, like I'm able to visualize things that other people can't quite see, but it's like, yeah, as soon as I saw that picture, and there were a couple of others, but they were like in focus and they were a little bit, but like just the nature of that picture there's an energy to it. I'm going like, oh, this is too perfect.
Was the blue tint already in place or was that added?
Yeah, well, no, yeah, it was like I've got some other prints from that photo shoot still sitting around that I pulled out of the trash and kept that day. And they've all got this kind of blue cast to them. And I remember going back and going, I wanted to have this, you know, and I don't know, like it was from a shitty office color printer, like laser printer. And so when they went to reproduce, I mean, I think the blue was probably, there were color photos, but there was a way to shift it so it didn't look just quite so photo-y. And yeah. Once they signed on, they got it. But in the beginning, it was like, it's like making an awesome new type of soup and then wrapping it in the ugliest label possible. You don't put our pictures on the cover.
Right.
Our faces don't sell records.
I like my favorite part of the story, and it's so very true, is they're like, well, you know, Geffen, they have an awesome art department. I'll just put all my trust in them. They know, they're the professionals. They got this. And then
every time I did that, it screwed me.
And then everything you see is terrible. Similar story with the toys. Management was like, oh, this is the best in Los Angeles. These are the best in the business. They do everybody's stuff. And they're sending me sketches by fax because it's, you know, the dark ages.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at these sketches of where we were taking it, and everyone knows where we took it. And it was fucking awful. It looked like a third grader drew it. And I was like, what? My manager, who I've just signed away my fucking life to, is telling me this is the best shit? Yeah, it's no way. And then you end up calling one of your buddies who's living in a trash can somewhere, and he doodles something out, and it's fucking iconic.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, the only other time I didn't fight for what felt right was the Simple Man video. And, you know, we got the guy who had done everybody else's power ballad video. And it was like, it never felt right the whole time we were doing it. It just wasn't, and it didn't get played. You know,
what was your vision for the video?
I didn't, by the time we got there, it was like, it was too late to have one, you know, it was like, I hadn't really thought like I wasn't a filmmaker. I went to film school, but like the first video was like, we just hired this insane French Canadian dude, who, we had a very small budget for the Hollywood video, like 30 grand. And he said, I'm only going to be able to give you a couple of days notice when we're going to shoot. It's going to be on a Sunday. And we went, okay, I don't know, whatever. And then he called us on a Wednesday and said, we're shooting this Sunday, you know, be at this address at 6 a.m. We went, okay. And what we didn't know is that he had just signed a deal to shoot a really expensive video. And I want to say it was for Tora Tora, but I'm not positive. Somebody who had 200 grand to spend on a video. And he bought all of this film stock and rented all this camera gear and all the rest of this stuff. And he shot it on a Friday and a Saturday, knowing that he was going to have to pay rent through the weekend on all the gear. And so he shot everything he needed to with them on Friday and Saturday. And we used all the gear they paid for to shoot ours on Sunday. We used their film stock. We used their steady cams. We used their dollies. We used their crane. We used all of their gear that they paid for. They probably don't know that. Hi guys.
How did you get the crazy French Canadian to agree to, I mean, that's like, you know, hey, I'll take your peanuts, you know, I've got big money here, but you know, how did that?
Well, you know, we had meetings with a couple of 3 different directors, and he walked in and was just like spinning. You know,
shit. Okay.
You know, he was young,
right?
And he hadn't done a ton of stuff, which is probably why he wanted to do it. But also, like, his energy was so good. Like, you know, his idea was, we're going to shoot it in an abandoned mansion, and we're going to trash the place, and it's going to be awesome. And we were just winging it. Like, you know, there's a scene in the video where I'm sitting in a chair playing a solo and this girl in a bikini walks by. The girl in the bikini was our makeup artist. We convinced her to go home, get a bikini, and come back and parade past me in the video because we didn't have any money.
That was Heidi Richmond.
Yeah. Yeah. Like we didn't have any money for models. So we talked Heidi into doing it. And it was like, the whole thing, like the only reason we were still conscious we were drinking so much was because of all the speed we were doing, and there are scenes in the video where David's literally passed out and we're still shooting.
Whose car are you driving in the beginning of that video?
We borrowed that car and painted flames on the front of it and ran it into another car.
Oh no.
Like we didn't damage it, but we borrowed it and painted the flames on and ran it into another car.
And then here's your car back.
Here's your car back. Yeah.
Flames, they'll wipe off. See you later.
It's probably tempera paint or something. I don't know, but yeah, that whole video was totally us.
Wow. Yeah.
And then we're on this, like the only cool thing about the Simple Man video was right over the hill in one direction were the Quonset huts where they shot all the exterior stuff for Gomer Pyle, USMC. Wow. And right over the hill the other way was Spawn Ranch. So that was cool. I kept disappearing from the shoot to go check out Spawn Ranch and disappearing over the hill to check out the Gomer Pyle set. But
wow, you got Private Pyle and
Charlie Manson. Yeah. And a trailer full of models who wouldn't even speak to anybody in the band. Right. They were a little freaked out by us.
Yeah. Well, that's perfect. They should be scared of you guys.
Yeah.
Let's jump to the next album. Again, this is a story you told me, but for the benefit of our listeners, I've always loved the song Slippin' Away on the second Junkyard record, 6s, 7s, and 9s. And you co-wrote it with Steve Earle, who, of course, went on to do many amazing things. But tell me the story about how you got Steve Earle involved in writing a Junkyard song, because this is great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we were in the studio making the first record, and our A&R person was a woman named Teresa Ensenat. And Teresa had just started dating Steve. This is just before Copperhead Road came out. And so she shows up at the studio with Steve in tow, and we go out to dinner. We take a break and we go out to dinner. And Teresa's sitting at one end of the table with Tom Werman and Dwayne, the engineer, and Steve and I are at the other end, and we don't know each other. But we start talking, and I find out he's from San Antonio, and he knows the Sextons and Townsend Guy, and so we're making a connection. But he's just this guy, I don't know. He's had all these hits on country radio for other people, and he's had all these hits on country radio on his own records, and I don't know anything about that. He's just this guy. And then Copperhead comes out and the song's a hit, and he comes through and he plays the Palace, but we just sold out the Palace. So whatever, he's just this guy. And, he's married to my A&R person, and we just get to be friends. He's around LA some, and we're getting to be friends with each other. And I don't know his story. I don't really understand who he is. And then, Geffen is pushing me to do some co-writes. I'm having a hard time writing the record. I've never written like this before. And I understand why second records tend to suck, because like on the first record, it's not that you had your whole life to write it. It's that when you're writing organically, for every 10 loose ideas you have for songs, only like 2 or 3 of them get turned into actual songs. And only like so if it's 3 out of 10 get turned into songs, then once you've got 10 songs, only 1 or 2 of them are any good.
Yeah, I tell people that all the time. It's like you have to write lyrics to these loose ideas that are actually inspirational. Right. All the other 7, 8, 9 that kind of didn't really tickle your fancy, you still have to write words to the ones that are okay.
Well, and that's the thing. Like on a second record or a third record or whatever, you finish every idea you start. And it's why like you write 30 freaking songs and there's only 3 good ones, because that's the right number of good ones, but you wouldn't have bothered to. So it's sort of soul crushing as a writer. And they were pushing me to do co-writes. And like, I spent a few days drinking beer and hanging out with Steve Cropper from Booker T and the MGs. We didn't write anything, but I made him tell me a lot of great stories.
Awesome.
And I tried to write with Rod Argent, and I tried to write with some other people, and but I was like, what about Steve? And so they said,
I'm sorry, we'll get to Steve Earle real quick. Were you writing for the guys in EZO at that point, at that moment, or was that later?
It was the same time. Yeah.
Same time. That's what I thought. I wanted to throw that in there.
I had also started collaborating with some people I'm really good at taking a good idea and arranging it into a good song. I have a very strong sort of pop sensibility, and I think Guns N' Roses is a pop band. You know, they're a hard rock band, but the songs are incredibly tightly arranged, and that's what pop music is. And I'm real good at that. Like working with Tom Werman, you know, Tom Werman comes in. Most bands have made a record or two, and then Werman comes in and they make their very best record because he's really good at taking your good idea and making it a great song. Like I love the first Motley Crue record, but the songs are so much better on Shout at the Devil. You know, the ideas are much more fleshed out and much more direct and powerful. You know, a lot of great ideas on the first record, a lot of great songs on the second record, and that's Werman. And when Werman was working with Junkyard,
first record seems to be riff and then break and drum fill and next section and then break and then drum fill and then and next song, same arrangement as that because they're still learning their craft, I think.
Yeah. And Werman's real good at like going in and leaving parts out and making the song simpler. And like when he worked with us, he was going like, this is the first time I've ever worked with a band where I would tell him, maybe we should do it 4 times instead of 2 because your songs are so tight. Maybe we should stretch them out a little bit. And he was making me write bridges because I had a tendency to start another song if I came up with a good third part. And so I did some of that, like, and the stuff that David and I did with Easy O was like, they sent us to New York for the same thing, see if they could get.
I've never asked you about the Easy O record. We're talking about Fire record. I believe it to be the second domestic release by a Japanese band, Easy O. You went to New York and it was Geffen that flew you guys out there?
Yeah, they flew the 2 of us out and put us up for 5 or 6 days, and you know we'd go out and party all night, and then we'd meet them at their office the next day and work on songs.
With the guys in Easy O, like the full band, or
like their drummer was the only one who spoke any English.
Wow.
And
so did any of those songs make their album?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. 1 or 2 of them, I think.
I think 2, yeah.
I never knew this.
I think Jamie St. James from Black and Blue wrote a song for that record with them as well.
And I kind of think he was the translator.
Oh, wow.
I can't remember for sure.
That wouldn't I wouldn't put it past Jamie St. James.
I can't remember, but they had a translator there we were going back and forth through a translator, and we go, what, you know, do you have any riff ideas? And they'd show us some riff ideas, and we'd sort of work on that a little bit. And like, what would you like the song to be about? And they would tell us, and then David and I would write some words, and they would make suggestions, but all through a translator.
Are you credited on that album?
Oh, yeah. Hell yeah.
Wow, this is all news to me.
I have the record just because my buddy Chris and Dave are on.
Oh, that's awesome.
I
didn't know that.
Because Fire is not their greatest moment. Sorry, Chris.
That's okay.
It's the record before that really got me into Easy O. And Gene Simmons produced that, and Gene probably even helped him write some songs. I mean, all the songs are about him anyway. Destroyer is a song on there. You know, they have a song called Destroyer. Yeah.
And I had seen them on Night Flight playing that MZA, whatever that.
No, that's Loudness.
Rock and roll crazy.
That's
Loudness.
That's Loudness. Right. Different band.
Right. But they were great guys. They had been in New York for a year, and they never went out to see music, and they never really were part of the scene. And like the drummer went out a little bit, but like we would go out, you know, we're on Geffen's dime. We'd go out and, you know, get hammered and see all these great bands and, you know, hang out and party with Raging Slab and the rest of the guys in New York and
wow.
And then drag our asses into sleep for 4 or 5 hours and drag our asses in. The first hour would be spent telling them what we did last night.
Right.
That's way more entertaining than any song we're going to come up with.
Living vicariously. Okay, well, we went out last night, did some research, so now we're ready to write some songs with you guys, you know.
Yeah.
Well, what did you do? Here's what we did.
Yeah, they were great guys, and we had a great time. Like
monster players. They could play their asses off.
Yeah, and that was like the most fun I ever had in New York, because every time I'd ever been there, I had been completely broke. And so being in New York on a expense account was awesome.
Oh, I'm sure.
So bring us back to Steve Earle. So you're back.
So I asked Steve if he'd be interested in writing, and he said sure. So David and Geffen flew me and Dave out to Nashville, and we hung out with Steve for 3 or 4 days and wrote a couple of songs together. And Slipping Away is the one that ended up on the record.
Yeah. Were you house sitting for him when he went on tour or something?
Yeah, that was later.
Later. Okay.
Yeah, that was later. Like we wrote Slipping Away, and we wrote another song that I ended up playing it in Gatesville. It was a little bit more that flavor than Junkyard, but well, I moved back and I didn't think too much else about it. And then he moves out to LA and is splitting up with Teresa, and I'm broken up with my girlfriend at the time. So I move in with him when we finish 6s, 7s, and 9s. Like, I didn't have anywhere to live. I was living in one of those Oakmont apartments out in the valley near the studio, and he was getting ready to go on tour. So I moved in with him, and then I house sat for a month and a half while he was in Australia, New Zealand, and somewhere else, Japan or something. And wow. over the course of that little house sitting adventure, some of the people who called the house looking for him and stuff, I'm like, who am I living with? I suddenly realized that like a lot of people knew who Steve was.
Kind of a big deal.
It was a much bigger deal. Like, it was pre-internet. How am I supposed to know? He didn't tell me.
Yeah.
Right? You know?
Well, I love that song. I think it's for me, it's one of my favorite tracks on the 6s, 7s, and 9s.
And I learned a ton from hanging out with Steve just as friends during that era too. Like after 6s, 7s, and 9s was done. Cause like we both come from Texas, and that gives us a certain common language and sensibility. But like I came up out of the punk scene, which is all inspiration. You're just vomit it out and you're done. And if you look like you're spending too much time working on it, that's like, what's the matter with you? What are you, lame? And Steve comes up out of a singer-songwriter and out of a Nashville model, where he was the guy who first explained to me that there's two parts of songwriting. There's inspiration and craft. And the inspiration is uniquely yours and you should protect it at all costs. But the craft is something you can get better at and that you can take input on. And like that had never occurred to me. And I never really thought much about craft. And Jason, like you were saying, the first Motley Crue record, there's no craft because all the songs is just same arrangement, because they don't have any of that yet.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
And so after hanging out with Steve, I start paying more attention to how songs are constructed and going like, oh, look, they did this, and I'm a big fan of the AC/DC simple songs and complicated arrangements. Like every time they change parts, they do it a different way. Mm-hmm. I'm a big fan of that, but yeah, hanging out with Steve was it's like a master class in thinking about songwriting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, dude, we were doing a lot of, it's not a secret. We were both completely out of our minds on drugs at the time. And like, we had been up for 2 or 3 days and we're getting ready to crash. And he's going, help me set up this recorder. I want to record this song I wrote. And so we set up the mics and we set up the little DAT recorder, and he plays this song called Cocaine Cannot Kill My Pain. And it's like the scariest, most powerful thing I've heard in years. I still have that recording from that day.
Wow.
And I go like, dude, when did you write that? It's going, oh, just over the last couple of days. I'm just going, I've been with you pretty much 24/7 for 3 days. Hasn't been a guitar out of a case. He's going, oh, I just thought about it. And then he picked up a guitar and he played it for the very first time in a finished arrangement, perfect. And it's better than any song I'll ever write. And I'm going like, and now I know what it felt like to be Salieri in the court of Mozart. It's like, I'm good, but I'm never going to be that.
Wow.
It's like, son of a bitch.
That's
and it's so dark and it's so powerful. And he thought about it for 3 days. I'm like, son of a bitch.
Wow. Some circles, that's just called Jedi.
Yeah.
And
it's just
I got to ask you also about the Junkyard trading cards. Now, some people, some listeners might remember these. I remember having them when I was a kid. It was basically the rock and roll equivalent of baseball cards or football cards. I think you bought a pack and you got a stick of gum and 5 cards. And I remember having the Junkyard cards, and I think Poison was another one of the bands, and I can't remember the other bands. It wasn't Kiss, because Kiss had their own exclusive line, but this was sort of some company came to you guys and a couple of other bands. How did that arrangement come about? Because you're the only friend of mine that has his own trading card.
How that happened was there were 2 or 3 really big merch companies that were doing everybody's merch when you were on tour. One of them was called Brockham. And we had signed a merch deal with Brockham. They did lots of bands, Whitesnake and Poison and all kinds of people. And Brockham decided to release trading cards of all their endorsee artists. And so that's all the bands that were on the trading cards were bands that were signed to Brockham for a merch deal. So that's why the band, there wasn't any mysterious bit of like, well, why did they get picked and not them? It's like, no, we were all already had a deal with the merch company that released
Brockham deal. I had stacks of those things that I just inherited somehow. But I mean, Exodus.
Yeah.
Like you said, Whitesnake, but Bon Jovi. And I believe that there was a Kiss.
Yeah,
but
Kiss
had
their own cards, but Kiss, I think that was part of their exclusive merchandising. This was more like
I think Kiss was in there, but it was just bad Kiss. It was like, Mark St. John. There's no kabuki makeup.
Yeah, but that's how it came about. Was Brockham did it? It's still funny as hell.
I think it's cool, man. I think it's really cool. And then so if you've seen the cards, you get a picture of the guy. Each guy in the band has their photo on the front of the card, and then you flip it over, and there's like little facts about each guy and stuff like that. Yeah. So it's like a
Faster Pussycat. That's all coming. Cinderella.
Yeah, everybody was on Brockham,
Yeah, I just remember having the Junkyard ones. And,
they were the coolest ones, so you didn't need.
Yeah, because you were definitely sort of the out of place band. Everybody else was like you were saying earlier, kind of pretty.
Well, I mean, we were the out of place band. Period. It's like there was a handful of bands like us that were real rock bands. Like there was bands like the Hangmen who were a phenomenal band, but they weren't really a hard rock band. They didn't really they were never going to be on a bill with those other bands. And sometimes we were, but we didn't have much in common musically or style wise with all the hair metal stuff, but we were a real legit straight up hard rock band. Yeah. And, there was nothing underground or garagey or whatever, and there was a handful of us around the country, like I said, Raging Slab.
Circus of Power.
Circus of Power was the one I was trying to think of when I said Raging Slab. Yeah. But especially Circus of Power, they were sort of like our New York brothers.
Yeah.
Because they were some rough trade just like us, but they were great, fucking great band.
Yes. Rhino Bucket, maybe.
Rhino Bucket.
In LA.
Yeah. Rhino Bucket came in like the second wave of that, and Little Caesar, and they were a little more clean cut for all their biker image. They were a little more clean cut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They weren't as, some of us were actually rough guys and some of us just looked like rough guys.
Right.
And Little Caesar's a great band. I love Ron dearly, but
I feel like there was a few other bands in Hollywood, in Los Angeles County rather, and that, but I can't think of them right now. But there were, I think that, I mean, dare I say, you guys were starting a trend of your own without trying to start a trend.
I've heard that from some famous, some bands that were way more successful than us about going like, dude, you guys showed up and we all felt like pussies.
That's right.
6 months later, every band was street rock.
Well, you said it like an hour ago on the clock. You said it like an hour ago. You guys were, the jackets with, you said the original Junkyard, gear had y'all's names on the back. You guys are walking around wearing these denim jackets all tattered and torn around everyone else looking like girls. I bet the guy that spruced his hair up and wore red lipstick and his mom's boots that night walks up to you and was like, oh, don't I feel like a tool?
It's funny, like later, after Junkyard was going, I was having a conversation with a bunch of guys, a couple of guys from a band called the Joneses, and I want to say that Duff was there. I can't remember, but like they were all saying like when I first got to LA, like I'm going to all the rock shows, but I'm greasing my hair back because it's growing out. It's only about 3 or 4 inches long, and I'm greasing it out while it grows back. And I'm wearing all black and engineer boots and a leather jacket and all this, and everybody else is glam. And and nobody knew who I was, but there seemed to be guys in bands that knew who I was because I knew them from their punk bands. And for the first 6 or 8 months I was out there, one of the guys told me they just called me the scariest man in Hollywood because they were certain I was just going to kick all their asses, and like I was like, I just felt left out really, but I was never cool enough for all that fancy business, and they would go like, yeah, that guy's too cool for us.
You just almost described like a scene out of Velvet Goldmine or something.
Yeah.
Some kind of weird, dichotomy, some kind of invisible wall, but you're still rubbing elbows with these people that you're cool with, and you go to see their bands play and everything, but they're afraid of you. It's pretty.
It's like, and I made friends with Duff and met Slash early on before there was a Junkyard, and then I'd go see them play and they'd be saying hi, and everybody else was going like, how the only guy that knows him is in the band, I was like, who is this guy? So, but I knew a lot of people because a lot of the punk rockers had migrated over to the early rock scene. There were other bands similar to us. None of them ever did anything really.
Yeah.
There was a phenomenal band called Dirty Dogs. It's a buddy of mine, Mickey McMahon's band. He was a great guitar player. He was almost in Junkyard but Brian got the spot. But like Dirty Dogs were amazing songs, amazing band, but they were just a little too rough looking.
Wow.
Wow. That's saying a lot.
Yeah, they were phenomenal. We played a bunch with them, and the band that Pat Mazingo was in when Junkyard first started, he was in a band called Pirates of Venus. That was, the singer was a guy named Rat's Ass from a punk band called Tales of Terror. And they were this great trashy rock and roll band, but drugs destroyed the band before they could even really get off the ground. And so, right around the time Johnny Hell had to leave the band, Pirates of Venus broke up, and we just called, and Pat and Todd were both in that band. And so we immediately got Pat in the band. And then when Clay had to go to prison, we got Todd too, so.
Right.
Well, you guys had
we were lucky that other bands kept breaking up right when the guy we needed out of that band, right when we needed him, because Kill for Thrills had just broken up when we got Todd.
I was just going to mention Kill for Thrills. I have their record, and honestly, I have to. Sorry, Todd. I actually looked it up online to see if it was worth anything because it's a numbered. It's low numbered, almost a black and white cover. I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's got a member of Guns N' Roses in it. The second wave, I guess.
Right.
But,
so Chris,
they're doing their thing. It just didn't really go. They never quite caught on, and they fell apart. And Gilby went to do something else, and right when we needed Todd. So
something else. Right.
Gilby went to do something else,
but it wasn't. I don't think it was Guns N' Roses. I think it was something else between.
All right.
Was he in a band called Candy or something like that?
I don't remember the order of things. I think Candy was first, but I don't know what Gilby was doing between Kill for. He may have gone straight to Guns N' Roses. I think there was a gap in there, but I could be wrong. I don't remember my own history, much less other people's.
Well, that's what me and Dave are here to try to help you along, help you recall most of it.
Speaking of your history, you've been pretty open and honest about some of your demons in the past, I guess is the way to say it. And we're thrilled to see you happy and healthy now and for the past 25, 30 years, whatever it is. But tell us, as much or as little as you want about going through that dark period and what eventually got you out of it.
And sure, I've been sober for 23 years but like I also was dead 4 times. So, it was touch and go there for a while. And really, I'm an addict. It's my first drug of choice was food in grade school, and as I progressed through it for a long time, it was a lot of fun. I was drinking, I was using probably more than other people, but I was still having a great time. Mm-hmm. It started getting out of hand in the beginning of Junkyard. I was dealing meth while we were making the first record, and almost got in legal trouble for that because the guy I was dealing with, the DEA raided his house, and I managed to get left out of that happily. But just before we went on our first tour, but heroin had overrun Los Angeles, and once there was no more meth, apparently there was no staying sober, and everybody was strung out in the late 80s, everybody. And so, heroin came into the picture, and like, it just, that's not something that's very manageable, but it was so difficult to be me without it. If I hadn't had heroin, I would have probably killed myself, but I found a way to just not exist for a portion of every day. And it was enough. But like, by the time we were making the third record, I was not in good shape. And, I was the primary songwriter, and looking back now, like I really believe that had I not been strung out on heroin, if I wasn't an addict, when Nevermind hit and the grunge thing exploded, we could have climbed into a van and signed a deal with Metal Blade, and in 3 years been on par with Motorhead, because we were playing the same places, and we had the same sort of integrity that they had, and we could have gone out there and done that, but I was in no condition to do it. And so the band ended, and then I moved back to Texas thinking there wouldn't be drugs here. I was wrong. And I spent a number of years doing whatever it took to try and stop. And really what made it doable for me was, just like a lot of other things in my life, a series of happy coincidences where I had a moment one day where I realized that, like, I can't function doing what I'm doing and I have no idea how to stop. And there has to be a way, but I don't know what it is. And later the same day, I was watching TV, and I was watching this episode of 2020, and they're doing a feature about this guy named Buddy Arnold, and jazz saxophone player. And I'm watching its music. I watch everything about music. And then they mentioned that he had been a heroin addict for 30 years. And I thought that was a weird thing to include in his music story, but it turns out the story wasn't about music. It was about how at 10 years sober, he had just founded an organization fully funded by the Grammys, whose only job was to pay for musicians to go to treatment. And I went, whoa, oh shit, that's my spot. Mm-hmm. So I wrote down their information and I called them up, and it took a while to get it organized, but they paid for me to go to rehab, and I've been sober ever since. They saved my life. Wow. Like I said, I had overdosed and died and been brought back by the paramedics 4 times in the last 4 months. And so, without having run across that show and maybe having the thought earlier in the day that there has to be a better way and I don't know what it is. And then something comes on TV and goes, maybe they know what it is. And so I went, and sure enough, they knew what it was. And I've been doing what they taught me ever since, and showing other people how to do it too. So
do you feel like
you should mention a little bit about that, because you've been in the recovery counseling business for a number of years, helping other people get through what you got through. And I think that's
for about the last eight, I guess a little over 10 years now, doing, for a living, trying to help people turn that corner and build a better life. And it's the place. I was working for a nonprofit for the last 6 years that just went out of business from COVID and funding issues, but I fully expect to find myself back in that field, both because it's something I'm passionate about and because I don't have a lot of marketable job skills besides that. So,
well, that's a good one. You're saving a lot of people. And, I've known you for 25 years, and Jason's known you even longer than that. And I'm looking at you today, and you look better than you ever have in all that period of time.
I'm as happy as I've ever been. I'm as healthy as I've ever been. I'm insanely happily married. I just started a new music project with Ian from the Riverboat Gamblers and Bobby Daniel from Fastball, and this buddy of mine named Chris Ward playing drums. And all we're doing is old school punk rock covers.
Nice.
And super fun.
Just super fun, and just wailing it out. And then, probably in March, we're going to try and find a residency somewhere, and 8 to 10 for the grumpy old punks.
Ian is a coworker of mine.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to also talk about the elephant in the room, and then we'll let you go because I know we're running long. Our listeners are going to want to know, I'm sure, Junkyard is back in action. They've done an album. They're working on a new album. They've been on tour. And obviously you're not part of that. And you, I understand, are at a different point in your life and all that sort of thing. And the idea of doing a van tour and everything, I get it. But from your perspective, tell people why, if you were contacted, or why you're not part of the current version of Junkyard that's reactivated.
Well, and I was when the band first got back together. Like I not long after I got sober in about 2000, we had 2 albums worth of unreleased material, and and CD-ROMs had just been invented. So I found a way to get all that material digitized so I could burn it onto CDs, and somebody in LA heard about it and contacted me about releasing it. And then they found out that I also had an entire 24-track live recording of the band from At Our Peak that no one had ever heard, that we owned outright. So they made arrangements for me to fly to LA to mix that. That's shut up, we're trying to practice. And word filtered out, and somehow or another, people started thinking we were going to get back together. And the Super Suckers offered us a couple of nights opening for them at the House of Blues. So we decided, just screw it, let's put the band back together. And Brian was busy with Bad Religion, so Tim stepped in because him and Brian were buddies. And we did that. You know, we went to Japan, we went to Europe a bunch of times. We did some fly-in dates and short runs around the States, you know, from 2000 to 2010 or whatever it was. And around the same time, you know, 8, 9, 10 years ago, something, whatever it was, like my health was not good. Like I was having all kinds of fallout from all the damage I had done, not expecting to live this long. And I was in the process of considering stopping doing Gatesville because even playing locally was kind of becoming a drag. And I imagine I wasn't super fun to be out on the road with. Plus, David was still drinking too much back then and wasn't reliable as a singer, and it was pissing me off. And how it went down wasn't pretty, and it rubbed me the wrong way for a while. But the simple truth is, if they would have just called and told me, "Hey, man, you don't live in LA anymore, and we've got somebody here that does, and we would like, there's no money in this, and we would like to keep doing it. Do you mind if we replace you with somebody else?" I would have been happy to sign off. That's not what happened, and it created some bad blood for a while. That's all behind us now.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've talked to Tim about maybe doing some co-writing on the next record, and we'll see. You know,
well, a lot of fans really enjoyed seeing you step out. You know, whatever phone footage, I guess you could call it, that surfaced from that show we recently did together in December.
Yeah,
that was fun.
Everyone was super happy to see you jump up and do a couple things.
You know.
Yeah, my heart was warm that night, I got to say, because I'm a big fan of the band and I like all of you guys, and it was so good to see you on stage in your hometown with Junkyard.
Yeah, it was great to do. You know, Dave and I have mended fences, and the rest of the guys, you know, it was like slipping on an old comfortable pair of pants. You know, it's like I remember this. You know, and
yeah,
you know, it might even have been you, Dave, that told me. It's like as soon as I started playing, I went, "Oh yeah, that's it."
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
because it's. Yeah. I have a unique approach, like Tom Werman called my playing freewheeling tightness. You can't say it's wrong because I wrote the song, but it's, you know, it has its own pocket. So, you know,
well, all of us here in Austin were treated to something special that night when you got up with Junkyard and did 3 songs at the end of the night, and it was awesome. And it was not only awesome to see you on stage and playing with the guys again, but it sort of signaled to those of us in the audience that whatever bad blood there might have been is at least at peace for the, you know.
It's fine. Like, and I love Dave like a brother, you know,
of course.
And, you know, I love the rest of the guys. And like, I don't have the energy to carry around dumb stuff, and whatever may have been said and, you know, without thinking in the moment, like it's ancient history now. And I can't worry about yesterday. I don't have the energy to carry around baggage. It took a minute to get past, but
sure.
I'm happy as hell that they're still doing it. I'm happy as hell I'm not in the band.
Right.
It's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah. Right. You know, it's fine. You knock yourselves out. You guys have a great time doing it. It's not worth having any kind of guilt, especially if it points at being a demon. You know, guilt is a demon, and it's my passions are elsewhere, and you know, all's forgiven on my part, and you know, it is what it is.
That's awesome.
Could it have been handled better a million years ago? Well, apparently not. But it's over. You know, like, that's the truth. It's like, could it have been done better? I think it was probably done the best it could be done, and it wasn't very good. But that's okay. It's fine. It's all fine. You know, it's all fine.
Sometimes we just forget how to treat each other, and you forget that, you know, I don't want to be a grown up and do the right thing. Fuck you.
Or you type something into a Facebook Messenger post in the middle of the night when you're hammered that you probably shouldn't have typed.
Yeah,
you know,
it had the wrong words in it, not the right ones.
Right. You know, whatever. You know, like I said, even when, and there was never animosity, I just had my feelings hurt for a while, but even in the midst of it, you can't have your feelings hurt by people you don't care about. So,
right.
You know, so that makes me happy that I got to do it, and that, you know, we all got to do it, and everybody knows that everything's fine. And I wish them all the best. And, you know, if I get to write some riffs or do some stuff, music for the next record, then that makes me happy too.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Well,
another win. So it's like win, win, win.
that's
Yeah.
3
That
wins
point.
right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, man, I really thank you for being so open and honest, especially on those last two subjects. I know they're not easy, but I feel comfortable enough asking you, and I appreciate you sharing with us because I think people get to know another side of you, and that's always that makes
If
for great
people listening and watching can't tell, just want to say Chris is one of my heroes. So
Yeah,
Chris, it's been awesome to have you on here.
absolutely. I feel the same. Nothing but respect for you. I love what you've done with your career. I love what you've done with your personal life. You're an inspiration on so many levels, and
I got a new
yeah.
thing I'm starting now called Big Cool Life. It's just, you can find me at bigcoollife.com. It's me talking about spirituality and about how to apply some actions in life so that it can be big and cool more than it isn't.
Yeah.
I've seen a couple of those videos, and they are
Yeah,
inspirational.
I was making them a while back, and I got sidetracked by the pandemic, but
Yeah.
we're gearing back up to do that now. So
Excellent.
Good. I hope you continue that because you're good at that as well. It's one of those things where you get this spark of inspiration and you run with it.
yeah, people seem to like to hear me talk about it, which is good because apparently I like to talk about it. So
Well, it's reflection that's not just all about you. It's about what it is you've been through and how it relates to just your surroundings and how to look at it.
And this thing that I've found that's like, I'm not a religious person. I'm 23 years sober. I still don't believe in God, but I know that there's something powering my spirit that I have to work to stay connected to. And I'm able to explain it because there's an awful lot of people like me, and that don't want to wade through the stuff that feels churchy in some of the recovery programs. And I've got a way to approach it that avoids that. And if it saves one life, it's worth doing. So,
oh my God. Yeah. And that equals love. And if God isn't love, then there is no God. So, you have found him, if he be a man or a person, and he is love. And that's what you are taking care of people by just kind of your reflection. I went full circle there, but
trying to do my part,
That's right. That's right. Well, you are, and I think that you have found a lot of a soft, comfortable place for your head and your heart, and people love you.
Well, it's just like, whether it's music or whatever, it's like, there's a guy I really like who says that if you have the means, you have the responsibility. And, whether your talent is writing songs and getting up on stage and kicking people's ass or breaking their hearts or painting a painting or this thing, whatever it is, everybody's got some kind of a talent, try and figure out what that is and go do it for people. So, and all I mean by talent is something that comes easily, that doesn't seem like it qualifies as talent because it's too easy.
Yeah.
So,
I love that.
So, yeah.
Well said. Well, Chris, we thank you so much for being with us today. What a great story. What a great history. And what a great guy. Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Gates joining us on the Talk Louder podcast this afternoon. On behalf of myself, Metal Dave, my co-host, Jason McMaster, we thank you all for listening to another episode of the Talk Louder podcast.